and go from there. Okay, well, folks, you know what that means. We got a Jody going, and it's time for one of our military shows. This is Remembering Desert Shield and Desert Storm, and we have Lieutenant Colonel retired Phil Forsberg on, and Phil has been gracious enough to say that he's going to help us remember Desert Shield and Desert Storm in the coming months, and who knows, it may be the coming years. Nobody knows for sure, but we do want, it's a shame that with all the folks that we, oops, wow, that snuck in on me, but we have a number of shows that we do and on with veterans and talking about veterans and talking about the part that they played in different campaigns, and we I've been very concerned over the past couple of years about Desert Storm or Desert Shield and Desert Storm, and that I would ask people that weren't in the military, just civilians, that you know were they pleased with it and so forth and so on, and what was it all about and what caused it. And a lot of folks have already forgotten, and I found that deplorable and decided we'll just give Desert Shield and Desert Storm its own show and make sure everybody remembers it. And it's also a good time to remember all of our veterans and remember all of our active duty folks. And we always recommend that if you're out, you're at a restaurant, you're at the airport, wherever you might be, that and you see somebody in uniform, or most veterans can smell another veteran out. And I don't mean that realistically, but there's just something about a veteran knowing another veteran. And if there's the opportunity, buy them a cup of coffee or a drink or a meal, whatever the case might be. And that holds true with our fantastic first responders. And we love them all. And we start out with a Jody, but we also take just a moment to think of silence, to think about all of our veterans from the past and our future veterans and all of the great Americans that have raised their hand and are on active duty right now. So with that being said, we'll bring Phil in just a second, but let's just a moment of silence to think about our military and how wonderful it is. Thank you, and thank you for your relatives that have served and are serving, and our future military, the best in the world. Phil, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well. Thank you very much, David.
Good. And, you know, I don't know about you, but I'm ready for one thing to be over with, hopefully tomorrow, and we'll get the results, and we'll go from there. But I really wanted to talk about, we obviously talk about Desert Shield and Desert Storm, and just a brief update of what you did, and then we'll get into what we had spoken about a little bit earlier that has our other Desert Storm expert, General Richard Dix, away from the studio. So just a little bit of background, Phil.
Well, I was commissioned through the ROTC program in 1982. Originally commissioned in the infantry as an infantry officer, and afterwards I went to flight school, flew helicopters, flew Cobra gunships and scouts, and then during after that, I went and got into the military intelligence field and switched into fixed wing flying, and so that's where I was. I was flying the OB-1 Mohawk at the time our alert came down for Desert Storm. I was had been in the Army about 8 years at that point, and was really not expecting it. And we got our alert for actually at the time Desert Shield, and so I deployed there with A Company, the 15th Military Intelligence Battalion, Aerial Exploitation. That we were part of 3 Corps in Fort Hood at the time, but they actually attached us, our battalion, to the 525 Military Intelligence Brigade out of Fort Bragg. It was the brigade that supported 18th Airborne Corps. So we moved from supporting 3 Corps to supporting 18th Airborne Corps. And of course, 18th Airborne Corps at that time, they deployed with the 82nd Airborne Division, the 101st Airborne Division, the 24th Infantry Division, and I think that was all their divisions that they brought, plus their separate brigades and Corps Support Command.
Phil, let me ask you something. You know, I remember well, and I'm sure you do too. But you know, the obviously the news as it was back then, better than I think it is today. But back then, you know, everybody in the country, everybody around the world knew that Saddam Hussein had invaded Kuwait. And did you, as this was breaking, did you not have a feeling that I may be doing something over there?
You know, I can still remember, I think it was the 2nd of August when, in 1990, when Saddam invaded Kuwait. And, you know, so many different things. I first heard about it, I was listening to the radio, and I heard it, and it didn't occur to me at all that we would do anything about that. It was half a world away, and I didn't stop to consider the strategic ramifications of that kind of threat to the oil fields, and so I just let it go.
Interesting. You know, I still, well, I don't lose any sleep over it. But when I'm talking to someone like yourself or other vets, and you know, you've got to wonder. I mean, no question, Saddam Hussein had been a tyrant in his own country, but basically was just that, Saddam Hussein, and in some ways had actually been an ally at one time or the other. And, you know, it was shocking that someone would think that they could invade another country, and he did it, I assume, strictly on the taking over the oil interest, and then at the end when he was burning all of it, I just, you know, the guy had at least 2 screws loose, if not more, in my opinion.
Well, I don't know what his initial motivation was for invading. However, you know, I think he probably made a calculation that the United States wasn't willing to come to blows to defend Kuwait, and of course that was a horrible miscalculation. I recall in December of 1990, our Secretary of State, James Baker, making the statement that Saddam had made a series of miscalculations. He advised them to not make any more miscalculations because they would become very, very costly. And, of course, they did.
Oh, yeah. And I guess, and again, because you were in Intel, please correct me if I'm wrong, and I'm sort of jumping around on you, but I remember as General Schwarzkopf would describe some of the filming that you all did, or some that we had, some of the video that was taken at one time or the other. Was Desert Shield and Desert Storm primarily the first real use of the smart bombs?
Yeah, I would guess. Yeah, the precision guided munitions.
Mm-hmm.
I can recall our aircraft at the time did not have GPS. The GPS satellites had just gone up, and a few folks had some GPS, had been given some GPS transceivers. Well, it hadn't been integrated into our aircraft systems, and so, I didn't even know how we would use it. Our navigation was gyro-stabilized inertial navigation, updated with navigation aids that would correct the bias in the system from time to time. But no, smart bombs, those really made their appearance there in Desert Storm and had a great effect. I can recall one of the generals giving a briefing showed a video of a Iraqi vehicle making it across a bridge just before it blew up, and he made the comment, "This is the luckiest man in Iraq."
Yeah, I remember that too. I also remember there was one that literally, I believe it was a chimney, but they showed them going in windows, they showed them going down chimneys, and it was just amazing what they could do. And then I guess Tomahawks were just really coming into play. I'm not a student of bombs, but it was, there was a feeling that, we'll just let the Air Force take care of it or the Navy take care of it, and maybe we won't have to put troops on the ground.
Well, of course, that didn't bear out. And if you're going to take the ground, you got to have somebody to physically take it and hold it. You can't hold it with a jet that flies over and drops a bomb. You just temporarily annoy people, or reduce their capabilities. But if you want to hold ground, you got to have what we call boots on the ground, and there's a reason we call it that. But the precision-guided munitions were wonderful. And one of the great things about precision-guided munitions, of course, is that they limit fratricide, the unintended...
the peripheral damage.
Yeah, collateral damage.
Collateral,
exactly.
Right.
Of course, if you precisely guide it onto friendly troops, you will have fratricide, and we did have some of that. That was a challenge. It's a challenge really any time you go to war. But it's very sad when it happens. But it was, considering past experiences in various wars, it wasn't too bad. If it's you, it's very personal. But
yeah,
it wasn't as bad as some others. Like, for instance, the folks shooting down all our paratrooper airplanes going into Sicily. That was not good. But that was some years before Desert Storm.
Do you feel like you were prepared for Desert Shield and Desert Storm? When you shipped out, had you had the training that you felt like this is all I need to do what I have to do in a foreign country?
Yeah, there's a lot of unknowns, and having your first baptism in fire, you're not really sure how you're going to respond. I can remember as a ROTC cadet, We had a master sergeant, a real tough Filipino guy who joined the U.S. Army and fought in Vietnam with the 101st. And, you know, he told me, you don't know, you know, when I was a young cadet, he said, you don't know how anybody around you is going to respond when you get there. You know, it'll really shake you down, and it'll show strengths, it'll show weaknesses, and so I didn't know. Now, as far as my training, I felt very well trained to fly my aircraft. I felt confident in our leadership. And, you know, I remember saying to our soldiers, you know, there's really only three things that a soldier can count on in combat. One is their training, the other is their equipment, and the third is their leadership. And if they have confidence in their training, in their equipment, and their leadership, and not a false confidence, but a justifiable confidence in those things, the soldiers can really do their job if they have confidence in those three things.
Could I add a fourth, maybe?
Sure.
The person on the left, right, and behind you that have your back.
Yes, your comrades, of course.
And that has proven so important over the years, and the brotherhood and friendships and relationships that come out of it. Like you said, you never know how someone's going to react. Even in training, you don't know how somebody's going to react, and it can be all the difference in the world and make all the difference in the world. But you'd wanted to talk about, and maybe you can really shed some great light on it. We are probably the most responsive country in the world. I can't speak for any other country. I don't know how good or bad the response from China or Russia or any of the powerful countries are, but I know that the United States is incredible and very responsive to any and everything. But it doesn't just happen, and you've got people that continually, even like my son that's in Intel, but that are working on if this, then that, if that, then this, and we have people here, how do we get them there? And it's all logistics, and it's all planning to have enough available that we can act and move and do our thing. What were the logistics like in Desert Shield and Desert Storm? Were we well covered?
Yeah, very, very well covered. I heard stories, talking about strategic planning, I had stories that as far back as the days of Richard Nixon, the United States had suggested to the Saudis that they should put large international airports, you know, here, and here. And those were actually the places we operated from. They were still building the one I was operating out of, King Fahd. But I heard other stories of soldiers that got to the theater before I did, said that they went to certain places in the sand and dusted away the sand and hooked up cranes to these lifting shackles and pulled trucks and all sorts of other equipment out of the sand that had been there away from the prying eyes of intelligence satellites. So I have a great deal of respect for the planners and who knows how deep these plans go that never actually get executed. I couldn't tell you, but
the only one I kidded General Dix about was the fact that we took camouflage green trucks into the desert, and then I happened to be at Fort Stewart when they had sent them back and were being repainted, but they brought them in from Europe and they needed to be camouflaged, green camouflage, and they sent them to the desert and they needed to be sand-colored camouflage.
Yeah, we did have. I can recall before we left Fort Hood, we painted all of our vehicles a sand color, and that was quite an undertaking because that was all done with in-house unit labor.
Yeah.
And we had quite a few vehicles.
Speaking
to paint.
speaking of that, and I had I went to Fort Leonard Wood many years ago, not I guess 20 years ago, maybe 15 years ago, and was shocked. And I knew about it, but I just didn't realize the quantity or the extensiveness of it. But in Desert Shield and Desert Storm, how much was it? How much was contract labor a factor?
I think it varied from unit to unit. I think we might have had a couple of tech reps from some contractors that worked on our equipment, probably mostly the signals intelligence stuff. But contractors do quite a bit. And, when I first come in the Army, soldiers had to pick up all the trash on installations, and, they had to, they had cooks and all this, and, they really streamlined it down. Congress holds their feet to the fire on the end strength they can have, and so wherever they can, they put in contractors or civil service civilians. But yeah, we in my unit we didn't have much, but in some of the folks that had some unique equipment or very highly technical stuff, probably would have been a lot of contractors.
Well, in a lot of cases, though, just like you said, cooks fall under it, and I was amazed too at Leonard Wood, the number of I say I grew up, but I was accustomed to the MPs, and yet at Leonard Wood they had a number of the gate guards weren't military; they were contract, and I found that very. I don't know. I guess I'm so old and so old school that I grew up or feel like that, the military should take care of itself. And even though a lot of the contract people are former military, but I still feel like I want my Army cook cooking for me.
Well, we did deploy with our cooks. But, I got to say they probably had it pretty easy there because we had a lot of our meals were fed out of a contract mess hall that was actually the king of Saudi Arabia himself, he had a mess hall on the airfield, and it was to basically feed his workers that were building his airport, and he just made it available to us. All we had to do was show up and sign in. And, of course, there was a big Turk sitting there at the sign-in sheet, and we would go in. We're not sure if he could even read or write any language, let alone English. So people would sign in as, Bart Simpson or Saddam Hussein, or, you see all these names on the sign-in sheet.
And we laugh, and I laugh with you on that. But this is I would say one of the. And again, I can't address any other Army. I can only address our military, and that only to a degree. But under the worst of circumstances, the U.S. Army or U.S. military has always carried with it a sense of humor, and I think that's one of the things that have kept folks going since the Revolution. And we kidded about the redcoats. We kidded about you know, we always could find humor in almost any and everything that we did. And I think that's a very powerful tool.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of boredom in being deployed for a war because it's not a 9 to 5 where you go home, but you have a lot of time where you're not actively engaged in fighting for your life. So there's a lot of time to read or whatever, and of course, soldiers like to make up rumors, and of course they'll just find ways to amuse themselves.
Yeah.
Speaking of amusement, I should say this, David. Of course, we were a separate battalion, attached to this brigade. We're nowhere a large enough organization to have a band, but we had a concert over in our battalion area one day that was given to us by the 101st Airborne Division Band, the division band.
Wow.
And I'll tell you what, I can't tell you how greatly that boosted the spirits of folks. It was just so welcome, and those folks are so talented. Are military musicians, just fantastic morale boost.
You got to give accolades to who thunked that up, and said, why don't we try this and see what happens? And the guy that was thoughtful enough to say, let's do it, he should be given the pat on the head,
Yeah.
Whether it was the commander or whoever it happened to be. And, music is another great cure for a lot of ills, a lot of boredom and everything else. And I think that's just, that story's beautiful. And, it's, like I said earlier, and that was a part of it, is them covering your back in their own way with the trumpet or with the whatever, the band. It was covering your back to boost your morale.
Well, they certainly had a combat mission. The band was, as I was told, was assigned to guard the Division Operations Center, or TOC as we call it, and that was the non-musical function of the band. And well, I don't think anybody ever got into any of our division talks. So
well,
what's they did a fantastic job.
What's the old saying? Once you've gone through basic and AIT or whatever, it doesn't matter what your MOS is. Everybody's MOS is the same. You're a foot soldier.
Well, I mean, there's a certain amount of that. And,
you may be assigned to this or assigned to that, or your MOS may change. But the bottom line is always you were trained in basic, and whatever your specialty was, you're still trained in basic to be a soldier.
Yeah, and there's a reason that they trained you how to use that weapon.
Yes, sir.
It's it's not just for they thought you would be on the Army marksmanship unit or something. I mean.
We've talked to a number of others. By the way, I want to take a quick break here and just mention the fact that our good friend, Colonel White, who's the director of the Georgia Military Veterans Hall of Fame, I talked to Rick today, as a matter of fact, and we still don't have a date. They've had to postpone because of the Georgia rules and laws or regulations or whatever. They've had to postpone the November 7th induction ceremony that was to be held as usual in Columbus, Georgia. And it was to be on November the 7th, but they've had to postpone it. And as the colonel said, as soon as we have a date, we'll start announcing that date for the next induction into the Georgia Military Veterans Hall of Fame. And as Rick says, bring your own box of Kleenex. And, it'll be my first time to go, but I'm looking forward to it. And one of the reasons that they can't have it is they can't serve food. And the former inductees all say, you got to do it just like when you did ours, just like when you did so and so, and they all want it to be like it was. And so, you have to respect their wishes as well as do a heck of a job for the folks that are going to be inducted. And we have so many heroes in Georgia that will say, oh, shucks, I didn't do anything, and yet they're exactly the ones that we were just talking about, Phil. The guy that was trained on a weapon, and when push came to panic, or when push came in, period, they picked up that weapon and fought just as bravely as anybody else. Which, let me ask too, and this is something I many years ago, and a lot of people can't appreciate, yes, I was young one time, but many years ago I thought of the conscientious objector as just nothing but poor cowardness in advanced form. And yet today I have a total respect for the conscientious objector that went into war, be it Vietnam. Did you all have very many in Desert Storm and Desert Shield?
You know what? We, of course, we were all volunteer force, and of course there was the one fella I think I told you about from our unit. He was just a sheet metal repair guy, and he elected not to show up for our movement date. He wound up spending about 8 years at Fort Leavenworth for that. But no, I mean, conscientious objector. I did hear of one doctor, I believe it was, from the Army Reserve, who, claimed he wasn't going to go because he objected to the whole thing or whatever. And I think he suffered some pretty severe consequences as well, because you take a check for showing up at drill year after year, and then when it comes down to we need you to we need you to do what we're paying you for, you don't show up, well then it's pretty significant. So but we didn't have conscientious objectors, I think, are the folks that either register ahead of time, with selective service or whatever. When you talk about conscientious objectors, I think about that movie Hacksaw Ridge, and I would say if you hadn't seen it, what a fantastic movie that was. About a fellow who never wanted to pick up a rifle, but was willing to go to serve his country, and did a fantastic job. Alvin York, famous Sergeant York from Tennessee, he was also a pacifist, but I think something clicked in him during the Great War, and he kind of set that aside.
Okay, let's get back to logistics. In your mind, what do you think, if there was the most important thing, quote unquote, would be the term that you would attach to logistics? Is it parts? Is it aircraft? Is it supplies, food? What would you think would be the...
Yes.
All of the above, huh?
Well, I mean, the system's not going to work if you don't have all of those things. I mean, of course, food and water and medical, are the big things to start with. But then fuel, and then of course repair parts, ammunition. It's all in there. And logisticians, they don't get enough credit for what they make happen. I came away from my time in the desert being very, very thankful and impressed with what the logisticians did, and yeah, those are my heroes.
I guess in some ways that follows with there's always got to be somebody behind the scene to support the ones in the scene.
Yeah,
And
and you know, on that note, also families. You know,
oh, absolutely.
military families are extremely important. Of course, they
Okay, that
just
brings
in themselves, they remind the troops what they're fighting for.
with that being brought up, and again, I can't address it because I wasn't there, but uh, with just what you brought up just then, and we certainly have always supported the families that the husband or the wife uh, have left the family behind while they go to do their thing in the military. But with that being said, do you think our incredible electronics help or hurt today? You know, I can see myself in a situation where I'm able to talk to my family for, you know, however long it is, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, an hour, whatever it happens to be, and then hanging up and in some ways maybe more depression than if I hadn't talked to them at all. But how do you feel with our modern electronics and being able not only to talk to them, but be able to see them and wave and, you know, you can't hug and kiss, but you can come very close to it almost.
Well, you know, I don't know. It's hard for me to imagine, you know, what it would be like today. When we were there, we had CNN on a big screen TV in our talk, or what we thought was a big screen TV back then, bigger than 19 inches, and we thought that was pretty high speed. I received my first email ever in Saudi Arabia in Desert Storm or Desert Shield maybe, was from my brother who worked for IBM at the time, and they had a system they were starting out with, this digital communications. It was called Prodigy. I don't know if anybody remembers that.
I remember the name, yeah.
But he sent this email, and it went somewhere in theater, and somebody at some place with a computer printed it off, and a piece of paper got delivered to me. So that's how I received my very first email in my life.
Wow. So again, do you think it helps with the instant communications that we have today to be able to talk to your family and see them, and or do you think that could hurt?
Well, you know, some of both, right? It takes a lot of the ambiguity out. You know, you don't have to try to imagine what's going on, where your loved one is. You know, they can contact you right away. But on the other hand, you know, you can share tragedy very quickly too. So and there's plenty of that.
You know, I've thought many times that my dad served in the Navy in World War II, and you know, he kept all my mother's letters as she did. She kept his, but you know, they would be not weeks. It would be sometimes months between not her writing or him writing. It just took that long to get to where it was going. Sort of like our post office today. No, I didn't say that. I'm sorry. But, you know, no, but during World War II, it could take 2 weeks, 3 weeks, a month, however long it took, it took.
You know, it's interesting you say that. My dad served in the Navy during World War II as well. I guess he probably knew your dad. Could have been, he was in the Pacific, so.
Yeah, so was mine.
Not many folks. But my dad was he was a sonarman on a Fletcher-class destroyer but he was also the ship's mail clerk.
Hmm.
And so he went ashore anytime they pulled into one of those little islands over there, and he would go ashore every day. And of course, Liberty was given out. You know, one side of the ship, the port side, would have Liberty one day, and the starboard another day. And he said he was leaving the ship one day, and the ship's exec, who was not very popular, said to him, "Hey, Forsberg, you know, you went ashore yesterday. You can't have leave 2 days in a row, or Liberty 2 days in a row." And my dad said, "You don't want your mail, sir?" And so he said, "Go ahead."
I bet he did. You know, it's stories like those that, and one reason we do this show, we do a veteran's story, and then we do David's Pick, and we're always talking to veterans, and the stories that, you know, unless you've been there and done that, the stories are just great. And just what you said I could almost picture, and I wouldn't know your dad if he walked in the door, but I can picture that scene happening and how fast the XO could change his mind.
Yeah.
Sorry I slowed you down.
That's right. And of course, there were probably a whole bunch of other sailors there, you know, observing the whole thing. And, you know, what's he going to say? Out of spite, he's not going to let them go.
Yeah.
Those guys don't get their mail. And if you don't pick it up here at Guam or Eniwetok, you know, when's it ever going to catch up with you?
Oh, well, one of the things that I try to do, or we try to do on all of the shows, most if not all, one is just what you mentioned earlier, is the support of the families are just incredible. But beyond that is that I think probably more than any other war, I was, you know, World War II has been, there are movies that made it look somewhat glamorous, but there ain't nothing nice about war. I don't care where it is, who's fighting it, or what kind of fight it is. There's nothing beautiful about it. It can cause some things that wind up being beautiful, a relationship, a friendship, or whatever, but, you know, your best buddy being shot or whatever the circumstance, there's nothing romantic or beautiful about war. War, as somebody has said, war is hell, and it is. And I'm very fortunate. I don't want to mislead anybody that I'd never served in country, but I can only imagine what some of my friends and what you went through and others went through. The only thing you and I have in common is that 11 Bush, 11 Bravo, and we both went through the same AIT. I assume.
Well, but also we also live in the greatest country on the planet.
Yes, sir.
And it was it remains that way in large part because of our willingness to protect it, and also the men and women who are willing to enforce that.
Yes, sir. With that being said, we need to take one more break before the end of the show, and again, want to mention the fact that if you haven't been to it, please put it on your list to take you, your husband, your family, whatever, whoever relatives are. If you're coming to Atlanta, please take in the Georgia Military Veterans Hall of Fame. And it is so impressive to walk through, and it's in the Floyd building right across the street from the Capitol. And it's just so impressive, and you'll learn so much about real, true heroes and the greatest generation and many others. It goes back, in fact, Phil, do you know how far back it goes?
I have not been there yet.
Oh, okay.
it's on my list to go there.
I've got to ask Rick. I should know. I know it goes back to the Civil War, or at least I'm pretty sure it does. And the other thing is the Healing Wall, which is in Johns Creek, where I happen to live, but it's at Newtown Park, and it's a replica of the Vietnam Veteran Wall in Washington, D.C. And this is the 50% size wall that travel all over the United States. And the stories, and they call it the Healing Wall or the wall that heals, either way, but it is incredible. And the stories that have come out of it from people that, you know, they didn't know what happened to their friend, their father, their mother, or whatever the circumstance might be. And it is literally closure and ability to close what happened many, many, many years ago. And I really hope that some of the politicians that I've heard talking will help with our educational system that will explain more about why we went to any war and what was given up and the sacrifices, just like you said, Phil, of the families. I know when Desert Shield broke out, that was probably one of the first engagements that the reserves were called up to fill many positions, and I went on the air. We had just started out, and I went on the air begging people to, if they had a reservist, a National Guard or Army Reserve person in their neighborhood, to think of their wives. The husbands that are gone and can't change a light bulb or can't fix the door or can't mow the lawn even, to take care of those people that were next to you that were left behind. And I still feel that way. If you've got a reservist or someone that's called to active duty, take care of their family. It'll mean more to you than it will to the family. You'll be so proud of yourself you can't stand it. Am I wrong?
No, not at all. When I know someone's deploying, I always make sure that their family has my phone number, and I offer whatever they need. You give me a call, and I'll help. And,
that's great.
I would like to make one plug, David, on that note, and that's for those who served and their families. If you're a veteran and you are not getting what you think you're entitled to, or you don't know what you're entitled to from the Veterans Administration, I would implore you to contact your local chapter of Disabled American Veterans and ask to speak to a service officer. And they will never charge you a nickel for what they do, and they will explain all the horrible bureaucracy of the VA to you, and they will help you get your claims filed or the benefits that you're looking for. So that's just a topic that's very near and dear to my heart.
You know, I tell you what I'm going to do, Phil. I'm going to challenge you, okay?
All right.
That I've got your telephone number, obviously, and I'm going to call. We're going to set up a day and a time that I want you to do a promo about just what you said so we can play it, and keep reminding veterans that there is somebody out there that is willing to stand behind them, and let them know and how they get a hold of them. There is, we've got to take care of our veterans. And so I'm going to challenge you to do a spot and so we can play it on the air. And in fact, I'm going to play one right quick about Operation Santa. Are you familiar with that?
Vaguely.
Okay, well we're gonna play that right quick and then come back with Phil and talk some more about Desert Shield, about 5 or 10 minutes worth. Hang on, we'll be right back after this.
This is Jim Davis with Operation Santa.
Phil, what do you think? We doing okay?
Real good. Yeah, and I like your idea. I like to bring in some other folks. When you called me this morning, I was at a meeting of our service officers, and so I can get a bunch of guys. We could do a round table if you want.
Sure. Let's do it on I'll talk to Rick and we'll do it on Thursday at 10 o'clock. Not this Thursday, but a Thursday at 10 o'clock, okay?
Yep. Keep
And
after me with that.
me, an E5, keep after a lieutenant colonel? You got to be kidding.
Well,
I mean, we support you, but, we can't do everything for you, No, I'm kidding. I'd love to and look forward to being able to put that on our air. And we've got, and I ask any of the veterans who are listening, whether they're listening live or on a podcast or whatever, however you happen to listen to the show, that I would ask that you pass our name on. We have had such great veterans on. I mean, Phil's the best, obviously. That's only because you're on the air right now. But no, we've had just super guests on. I was telling Colonel White, in fact, just today when I was talking to him, and he helps line up most of our guests. But I was a bit, I don't know, leery, concerned, about who he might get to be on with me. But every vet that has called in or come in has just been absolutely fantastic. And I'm so proud of this show and David's pick that I do on Thursday mornings that are veterans. And, I've just been very blessed. And Rick White is part of the reason. He's a fantastic gentleman. Mike Mazzell, I'm sorry, Michael, in Johns Creek that he was head of and is president of the Veterans Association and got the Vietnam Wall. He was a instigator and pusher of getting the wall put into Newtown Park in Johns Creek. And I also want to mention, I don't know him well, but also want to mention that Peachtree Corners has quite a memorial too. And I've had their leader on, but we've never met, and I'm going to keep pushing them until we get it. But Phil, you don't have to worry about me bothering you. I was company clerk at one of my units, and you know what those guys do. So
yeah,
it won't be a problem hollering at you and forcing you to do a promo for us. And it's so important because, I would say if anything, a lot of veterans really have no idea. And I wish they would do television commercials about that. If you're a veteran, look into all of the possibilities you have. They do it now for some of the medical and some of the things, but there's so many things that are just washed away or not. I wouldn't say they're not hidden. They just don't know. And we've got our job, your job, is to inform them that there are people out there able and willing to help. And this goes from everything from medical to, and you and I talked about this, to internment. And, none of us are going to get out of this alive, so might as well make the plans.
Yeah. I mean, the benefits are your medical benefits, your health care, disability, home loans, education, vocational rehabilitation. There's so many things, and of course, the last thing is internment. But also, then there's things for dependents as well after you're gone. it's very important for folks that have served to be familiar with the benefits that are available to them.
And it's not just only, and I know you'd mentioned disabled veterans, but it's not just disabled veterans, it's every veteran. And they're even extending some of the benefits now to reservists, which, I personally think it's time that they did, but, there's two sides of that coin too. But, the one thing we all have in common is that we raised our right hand.
Yeah. And, these benefits are not just available to the disabled and not just available to the combat veterans. And these are benefits that were put in place by our nation in our public laws. And part of it is to make service more appealing to folks. So when you have a success story about the benefits you're getting from the VA, it helps in recruiting and retention.
Oh yeah, and I as I always mention my son that's a major in the Air Force, and he's going to career it because it is so different from when I was in that it's a job. It's plain and simple. It's a job with a uniform, and he loves what he's doing. He loves the folks that he works with, and he just bought it. He and his wife just bought their first home and outside of Shaw Air Force Base, and it has turned into, I'd say, more than just a competitive job. And there's so many opportunities in the military. Everything from playing on a boat to driving a big truck. Whatever you want to do, it's available. And working with computers and whatever is your thing, the Army, the Navy, the Air Force, the Marines, they have a place for you. And you get to choose it for most part. So if you're graduating from high school or you've got a grandson or granddaughter that's graduating from high school or college, be sure they look at one, if not all, branches of the military. Because I would literally bet, and back me up on this, Phil, that they can find something of total interest to them, whether they're underwater divers or they love scuba diving or whatever they like. It's there for them.
Yeah. Even music.
Even music, absolutely. Oh, and what a thrill to be, like you said, the band from the 101st, just, to have a uniform on, a military uniform on, and be able to do what you love, which is music. I can't think of anything better. And they work their butts off. I know for a fact. The musician, they train as much as the rifleman does or anybody else does. So, have I bored you to death, Phil? Or will you come back? Not today?
Let's try again another time.
Well, I think we're going to try again next week, aren't we?
Yeah.
And we'll come up with some more colorful information that people probably have no clue about, but after they get through listening to this show, they'll know all about it. And with that being said, Phil, thank you again for today, and I look forward to talking to you next week.
All right, my pleasure, David.
Take care. Bye. Have a good weekend.
You're listening to America's Web Radio.
What do you think, Phil?
If you live to serve and want to make an even bigger difference, consider joining the U.S. Army. With training in fields like medical care, linguistics, and engineering, an Army